A vast cylindrical chamber stretches up into the gloom, lined with countless shelves of glowing crystalline jars. Each jar pulses with a soft, ethereal light, containing a single encapsulated memory. The air hums with a quiet, powerful energy. This is the Grand Archive, the heart of a city built on the currency of remembrance. Lyra 20S, her eyes a deep, unsettling grey, sits at a simple stone desk. She is a scribe, her hands moving with practiced, hypnotic grace over a series of glowing crystals. She wears the simple, unadorned robes of her profession. Her gaze is distant, as if she is looking into another world. She is experiencing a memory. A faint, joyful melody plays in her mind. A woman's laughter, the feel of soft grass on bare feet, the crisp, clean scent of a mountain breeze. This is the memory of first love. She is archiving it, copying the emotional data from a raw source and compressing it into a single, sellable unit for the great houses. In our world, nothing is more valuable than a memory. It is a commodity to be bought, sold, and traded. People pay a fortune for the feeling of a wedding day they never had, the triumph of a victory they never earned, the peace of a childhood they never knew. We, the scribes, are the purveyors of this currency. We are the keepers of humanity's past and the architects of its future. And I, Lyra, am one of the few with a perfect memory, a gift that allows me to experience every detail of every memory I touch. It is a gift I am beginning to believe is a curse. Lyra finishes the task, a faint sigh escaping her lips. The crystal pulses once, and the feeling of first love is gone, stored away. She glances up at the shelves, at the thousands of memories that make up their world's collective history. Every memory is accounted for, every feeling catalogued and priced. It feels so complete, too complete. A bell chimes, signaling a new assignment. She looks down at her tablet. The assignment is not from a common merchant or a private citizen. It is from the House of Lumina, the most powerful and secretive of the memory families. They are the hoarders, the collectors of the most valuable memories, the ones who truly control the market. Their request is simple: transcribe and archive the family history. Lyra feels a prickle of unease. The House of Lumina rarely trusts an outside scribe. Their archives are legendary, filled with the most priceless moments in history. She accepts the assignment, her hands trembling slightly. This is an honor, but it feels like a test. The Lumina archives are a stark contrast to the Grand Archive. The room is smaller, a single black stone chamber lined with shelves of black obsidian jars. The air is cold still. The memories here don't pulse with light. They sit dormant, waiting to be activated. A guard stands at the door, his face a hard mask. He hands Lyra a single, heavy stone tablet. It is a master memory, the complete history of the House of Lumina. Lyra places the tablet on her desk and begins her work. The process is different here. There is no joyous melody, no feel of grass. She is experiencing pure data. Thousands of years of history unfold in her mind. Generations of luminers, their triumphs, their innovations, their victories. She sees 1,000 moments of 1,000 lives, all seamlessly connected, a perfect, unblemished record. She moves through the history, her mind cataloguing every moment with her perfect recall. The birth of the first Lumina patriarch, the construction of the city's first wall, the Great Famine, the Great Flood, the Long Wars. It is all there, a testament to a powerful family's survival and dominance. Then she feels it. A gap, a sudden, jarring void in the timeline. The memory skips over 100 years. It is a clean cut, a surgical erasure, a deliberate act of deletion. She runs her mind back and forth over the void, feeling for any stray echoes, any remnants of the past. There is nothing. Her breath catches in her throat. Her perfect memory has never encountered a void like this. It is a physical absence, not a lack of data. This was not a forgotten history. It was a history that had been intentionally, violently purged. Her hands tremble, her focus now a frantic search for any sign of what was missing. And then she finds it. A flicker, a small, almost imperceptible fragment of a moment. A single stray pixel that had somehow survived the purge. She focuses on it, drawing it into her mind. The feeling is not grand or epic. It is simple, mundane. The feel of a rough wooden handle. The sound of a simple, happy song. The scent of cooking food. A woman's gentle, work-worn hand patting a child's head. The memory is so small, so ordinary, so human. It is the memory of a world without great houses, without memory currency, without the endless pursuit of manufactured emotion. It is a memory of a time when the simple, everyday moments were the only currency that mattered. And it was a memory that had been deemed so dangerous, so valuable, that it had to be completely erased. The void she felt was not a lack of memory, but a grave. Lyra's mind reels, her body shaking as the truth washes over her. The powerful families didn't just hoard the past. They owned it. They manufactured a history that suited them, and they purged the pieces that didn't. The most valuable memories were not triumphs or victories or moments of bliss. The most valuable memories were the mundane ones, the quiet ones, the ones that reminded people of a world they had lost and could, perhaps, regain. Lyra's eyes snap open. The guard is watching her, his expression unreadable. She has a choice to make. She can document the erasure, fill in the void with a lie, and become a trusted scribe for the most powerful family in the world. Or she can try to find the rest of the forgotten memories. Her perfect memory, a curse she had always believed, was now a key that could unlock a past that had been buried, and a future that might still be saved. The Lumina guard's eyes were like two dark stones, unblinking, unreadable. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained a perfect and moving mask of a dutiful scribe. She had a choice, and in that agonizing silence, she made it. She would not document the erasure. She would not fill in the void with a lie. She would seek the truth, no matter the cost. She carefully, meticulously archived the history she was given, ensuring every detail was transcribed perfectly, except for the missing 100 years. For that, she simply logged a data corruption error in her report, a plausible, if unusual, flaw. The guard took the tablet without a word, his expression never changing. As he sealed the Lumina archives behind her, Lyra felt a profound relief, quickly replaced by a cold dread. She had not escaped. She had merely passed a test she had no idea she was taking. Back in the Grand Archive, surrounded by the warm, humming glow of a million manufactured memories, the air felt suffocating. Every happy thought, every triumphant moment, every purchased feeling was now a testament to the grand deception. She couldn't stay here. The same system that had kept her safe for her entire life was now a trap. She had to find the rest of the fragments, the pieces of the forgotten past. But where? The public archives were out of the question. She knew with a terrible certainty that any memory with even the faintest echo of a world before the families would have been purged, locked away, or destroyed. Her perfect memory, however, was a weapon. She began her search in the most overlooked corners of the Grand Archive, the discarded and low-value memories that no one cared to buy. She sifted through thousands of mundane, forgotten moments. The taste of a bitter herb, the sight of a cloud shaped like a fish, the feeling of a cold rain on a summer day. She was looking for an echo, a resonance that matched this single fragment she had found. Days bled into nights. She worked with a quiet, frantic energy, cloaking her true purpose in the guise of a scribe auditing old data. Her perfect memory, a curse she had once believed, was now a tool of liberation. It was a net that could catch the most fleeting of echoes. The mundane was not a treasure in this world. It was debris, and in that debris she began to find more fragments. A fragment of a simple song, one she had never heard. The feel of a crude pottery bowl, its surface imperfect but loved. The faint, sweet smell of fresh cut hay. They were small, almost imperceptible, but they all spoke of the same thing. A simple, unadorned world. A world that was no longer here. But the fragments were not enough. They were pieces of a story without a narrator, a puzzle without a clear image. She needed a guide, someone who knew where the most dangerous memories were kept. She needed to find a black market memory dealer, a person who traded in the forbidden and the suppressed. Her search led her to the underbelly of Sanctum, to the labyrinthine tunnels below the main city. Here, the hum of the Grand Archive was a distant echo, replaced by the chaotic noise of a world that thrived on scarcity. She followed a faint rumor, a whisper of a dealer known as the Keeper of Lost Things. The name itself was a promise. She found him in a cramped, dark hovel, surrounded by glowing jars that held not memories, but emotions that had been deemed too chaotic for the masses. Fear, rage, grief. The keeper, a gaunt man with a tired face, looked at Lyra with an unsettling, profound understanding. "You're a scribe," he said, his voice a low rasp. "And a thief." Lyra's heart pounded, but she held her ground. "I am looking for a memory," she said, her voice filled with a desperate conviction. "A memory that was stolen." The keeper didn't ask for a memory. He didn't ask for currency. He simply looked at her, his eyes filled with a grim sympathy. "The families don't steal memories," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "They purge them. What you are looking for is not a memory. It is a world, and it is buried in a place you can never reach." He pointed a trembling finger at the city above them, to the place where the Grand Archive stood. "The heart of the archive. That's where they keep the truly forgotten things. They are not in jars. They are in the very foundation of this city. They are in the bedrock. Go, scribe. Go to the heart of the lie, and you will find your truth. But be warned, some truths are not meant to be found." The keeper's words, a chilling echo of her own dawning understanding, propelled Lyra forward. The heart of the archive, the bedrock of the city that was her destination. It was not a physical location she could simply enter, but a place she had passed 1,000 times in her scribe duties, a place guarded by the very fabric of the system. She needed a plan. She returned to the Grand Archive, her purpose now a burning core of defiance. She spent days meticulously studying the architectural schematics of the building, a part of her training that had once been rote but was now her lifeline. She discovered a hidden, rarely used maintenance access that led to the very lowest levels, where the Grand Archive was built on a series of ancient, seismic-resistant pylons. These pylons, the schematics revealed, were not just structural. They were embedded with raw, unarchived crystalline material, the building blocks of all memory. It was a cold, unforgiving place, a world of metal and stone, far from the polished elegance of the upper levels. Lyra descended alone, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the silent, humming power of the raw crystals around her. They held no specific memories, just a vast, blank potential. She ran her hand along one of the pylons and felt a quiet, powerful resonance, a sensation she had never experienced from a manufactured memory. It was the feeling of a world before it had a story, a time before it had a price. And in that vast emptiness, she found what she was looking for. Not a jar, not a glowing crystal, but a scar, a faint, almost imperceptible discoloration on the surface of the pylon, a tiny, almost invisible etching. It was a trace of the forgotten history, a deliberate mark left by someone who had been there before her, a single, perfect, and defiant act of remembrance. She reached out with her mind, her perfect recall focusing on the minute etching. A flood of information hit her, a torrent of raw, unarchived emotion and memory. She saw not just a song or the feel of a bowl, but faces. The faces of people she had never seen, their smiles genuine, their laughter unpurchased. She saw a village, small and simple, with no grand houses and no archives. She saw a world where people shared their memories freely, telling stories around fires, not for a price, but for the sake of connection. She saw a world where the most valuable thing a person had was not their memories, but their life. The torrent of images was too much. Her mind, a perfect vessel for curated memories, was being flooded by the chaotic, messy, and beautiful truth of a forgotten world. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed, the raw power of the forgotten memories threatening to shatter her. It was in that moment that she realized the Keeper's warning. The truths were not in jars. They were in the foundation of the world, and they were not meant to be found. The pain was unbearable. A million moments of a million lives crashing against the carefully constructed walls of her own mind. She had found the truth, but it was too big for her. She had a choice to make. Let the truth destroy her, or find a way to make it a part of her, to somehow make it a part of the world. Lyra's body convulsed, 1,000 sensations assaulting her at once. The pain was not physical, but mnemonic. A searing agony as the raw, uncurated memories threatened to dismantle the very architecture of her mind. She saw a world of people sharing memories freely, their faces lit by a fire, their laughter echoing through her consciousness. This was not just a forgotten past, it was a way of life, a system of being that had been actively suppressed. The families had not simply stolen memories, they had stolen a form of communication, a way of being human. A new sensation, cold and crystalline, forced its way into the torrent. It was an instinct, a part of her scribe training that had been buried under years of routine. She had always learned to absorb memories, but never to filter them. Now, out of pure, frantic desperation, she learned. She saw the raw chaos of the memories as a rushing river, and with a superhuman effort of will, she began to build a dam, not a wall to hold back the water, but a series of channels, of sluice gates, to direct the flow. She separated the memories not by content, but by a quality she had never noticed before, their truth. The curated, purchased memories had a clean, smooth texture, a polished surface that reflected exactly what they were supposed to be. The forgotten memories, however, were rough, unpolished, and raw, with a chaotic, vibrant energy that sang with an undeniable authenticity. Lyra began to sort them, to categorize them, to give a structure to the truth. She was not just a scribe anymore. She was a curator of chaos, an archivist of a truth that was never meant to be seen. As the pain subsided, replaced by a cool, methodical clarity, she understood. The family's power was built not on hoarding memories, but on controlling the narrative. The manufactured memories were not just products. They were building blocks of a fabricated history, a story where the families were the heroes and the people were dependent on their benevolent grace. The purge wasn't just to erase the past, it was to eliminate a rival system of being, a world where the power of memory was not a currency but a collective, untamed force. Lyra rose to her feet, her mind no longer a vessel for other people's memories, but a living, breathing archive of the forgotten truth. She had a choice to make, and she had made it. She would not hide her knowledge. She would not simply become a scholar of the past. She would become a force of change. She would not just reveal the truth, she would share it, one raw, unpolished, and unapologetic memory at a time. The families had built their city on a lie, and now Lyra was going to bring it to its knees with the truth. She would not just be a scribe of the forgotten. She would be its voice. She now knew that there was only one way to truly give the people back their memories, and it would be the most dangerous act of her life. She would have to find a way to broadcast her mind, to send a signal that would overwrite the fabricated history of the city with the messy, beautiful, and utterly real truth of the forgotten past. Her journey into the bedrock of the city was over. Her war against the families had just begun. A new purpose, colder and sharper than the fear that had driven her before, settled in her bones. The Grand Archive, a place she had once seen as a sanctuary, was now a weapon she would turn against its makers. Her perfect memory was not just a passive tool, it was an active conduit. She could not simply give people the truth, she had to make them feel it, to experience it, to remember a life they had forgotten. Her mind, now a perfect catalogue of 1,000,000 purloined moments, began to analyze the architecture of the Grand Archive itself. Every aisle, every shelf, every pulsing jar, they were all connected. The grand cylindrical chamber wasn't just a storage unit. It was a massive city-wide antenna. The crystalline jars, each a single captured memory, were the nodes. The pulsing energy, a constant hum in the air, was the frequency. The scribe's desks, each a single point of interaction, were the interface. The families had built a closed circuit, a system designed to transmit only the memories they allowed. Lyra's mind, now a nexus of both the curated and the chaotic, began to draw a new set of schematics, not on paper, but in the luminous pathways of her own consciousness. She saw how to break the circuit, how to overload the system, how to turn the Grand Archive's own power against it. It was a terrifying, beautiful plan, a perfect heresy. Her first step was to return to the Keeper of Lost Things. She found him in the same hovel, surrounded by the jars of chaotic emotions. He looked at her with a knowing, weary gaze. "You look like you've seen a ghost, scribe," he said. "Worse," Lyra replied, her voice firm. "I've seen a world. I need your help. The families are not just hoarding memories. They are controlling them. They have turned the Grand Archive into a tool of their deception. I have a way to break it, to broadcast the truth, the Keeper's face, usually a mask of grim resignation, cracked with a rare flicker of hope. The bedrock. It spoke to you." Lyra nodded. "It did. I need a way to get a message to every scribe's desk, to broadcast a forgotten past directly into the Grand Archive's network. I need you to create a memory, not a feeling, not a moment, but a signal." "A virus?" The Keeper's eyes widened. "A virus? That is a form of treason the families would not tolerate. They would purge you." "For good, they'll have to find me first," Lyra said, a cold resolve in her voice. "Will you do it?" The Keeper hesitated, his eyes lingering on a jar of pure, unadulterated grief. He had seen what the forgotten past had done to his world. "I do not create memories, scribe," he said, his voice a low, painful whisper. "I simply traffic in the ones they deem too dangerous to be seen. But what you are asking for, it is an act of creation. It is the beginning of a revolution, but it will require a memory more powerful than any you have found so far." "What kind of memory?" Lyra asked. The Keeper pointed to a jar sitting in the corner, a plain, unlabeled crystalline jar. It held no light, no discernible energy. The last memory they purged, the final act of defiance before they sealed the world away. "It is not of a person or a moment, scribe. It is of a concept, a forgotten principle, the memory of free will. It is a memory you cannot handle. It will shatter you." Lyra looked at the jar, its opaque surface hiding a truth more powerful than any she had ever encountered. She had faced the pain of the forgotten past, and she had survived. She would not be a mere witness to history. She would be its architect. She reached out and took the jar, the cold crystal of profound promise in her hand. The war for the soul of humanity had just begun. The jar of free will felt cold and impossibly heavy in Lyra's hands. It was opaque, a void of nothingness that absorbed all light. It held no single memory she could grasp, no emotion she could define. Instead, she felt the pressure of a concept, a primal force that hummed with a quiet, terrifying defiance. This was not a memory to be recalled. It was a truth to be understood, and it was threatening to dismantle her from the inside out. The Keeper, his face a grim mask of a prophet who had seen too much, watched her. "You have to do more than just absorb it, scribe. You have to become it. You have to release it without letting it consume you." Lyra's perfect memory, her lifelong curse, and now her only weapon, was designed for order. It categorized, indexed, and filed. This new memory was pure chaos. It was the antithesis of everything she was. She closed her eyes, and with a breath, she allowed the jar's contents to flood her mind. It was not a torrent of images, but a cascade of raw, unfiltered potential. The sensation of a person choosing to love, even when it was against their interests. The feeling of saying no to authority, of a singular, defiant thought changing the course of 1,000 lives. It was the memory of a choice that belonged to every person, a choice that the families had systematically purged from the world. The pain was excruciating, as if her mind, a finely tuned machine, was being forced to accept an impossible variable. But this time, she had prepared. She used the lessons she had learned in the bedrock, building mental channels and sluice gates. She didn't try to contain the chaos. She tried to navigate it, to give it a structure of her own. She began to see not a single terrifying memory, but a million tiny, beautiful moments of human will. The feeling of a mother shielding her child from a storm, the bravery of a stranger extending a hand in kindness, the simple, defiant act of a person choosing to dream. She was no longer just a curator of the forgotten. She was the vessel for a new history, a history of every choice ever made. As she absorbed the free will, a sharp, crystalline alert sliced through her mind. The Grand Archive had sensed an intrusion, not a person in its halls, but a flaw in its system. Lyra had become a ghost in the machine, and the machine was now looking for her. She had minutes, maybe seconds, before the families realized what was happening. She rose, her body trembling with a new kind of power. She looked at the keeper. The broadcast. Now. He moved with a frantic, desperate energy, pulling a series of crude, bronze dials and wires from a sack. He connected them to a small, unassuming crystalline shard, no bigger than her thumb. This is it, scribe. A signal jammer, a way to open a channel to every scribe's desk in the city. But the energy, it will take a memory of immense power to fuel it. Lyra held out the jar, its contents now integrated into the very core of her being. I have it, she said, her voice filled with a cold, unwavering resolve. The memory of free will. It's not just a concept, it's a key. The key to everything. They raced through the lower maintenance tunnels, a labyrinth of dust and forgotten metal. The air around them began to pulse with a low, menacing energy. The Grand Archive was preparing a response. It was locking down, its crystalline walls humming with a high-pitched drone, its security system sensing an anomaly in its own bedrock. Lyra, with her newly expanded consciousness, could feel the machine's fury. She was an anomaly that had to be purged. They reached a secluded chamber, a central power nexus where all the crystalline pylons of the archive converged. It was the nerve center, the heart of the lie. The keeper set up his device, a chaotic mess of wires and bronze, a testament to pure, unrefined purpose. Lyra stood before the nexus, its humming energy a constant, dull roar in her ears. This is it, scribe, the keeper said, his voice barely a whisper. Connect your mind, broadcast the memory. This will be the first and only time you can do this. The moment you do, they will know exactly who and where you are. Lyra nodded, her eyes closed. She placed the jar of free will, its cold, opaque surface now pulsating with the knowledge she had contained, onto the nexus. She reached out with her mind, connecting to every scribe's desk, every home, every market stall, every corner of the city where a memory jar was sold. She pushed the memory not as a single file, but as a pure, unadulterated sensation of choice. She sent the feeling of a world where one could simply be, without the need to purchase a past or a feeling. The city went silent. The constant, low hum of the Grand Archive was gone. It was replaced by a deafening, echoing silence. In the streets, people stopped, their hands hovering over memory jars that had suddenly gone cold. The pulsing lights in the grand homes of the families flickered and died. The memory-addicted populace felt an emptiness, a sudden, jarring lack of their purchased bliss. And then a new feeling began to bloom in their minds, a strange, terrifying, and beautiful feeling of a choice. The raw, beautiful memory of free will was now in their minds, a seed of rebellion planted in the hearts of 1,000,000 people. A blaring alarm, a sound she had never heard, echoed through the tunnels. They were coming. She and the keeper had done it. They had broken the system. The city was no longer a gilded cage of purchased memories. It was a blank canvas, a world waiting to be written. But as she looked at the keeper, her heart filled with a terrible certainty. She had won the battle. The war, however, had just begun, and the families now knew exactly where to find the scribe of the forgotten. The blaring alarm was a sound Lyra had never heard. A high-pitched shriek that was not just a warning but a physical assault on the senses. It was the sound of a system under siege, and Lyra, the scribe of the forgotten, was the invader. The keeper, his face pale with a mix of fear and triumph, grabbed her arm. "They will be here in moments. They will not send guards. They will send purifiers." Lyra knew the name, a whispered legend among the scribes. The purifiers were not soldiers but mnemonic assassins, trained to enter a person's mind and erase specific memories. But they had only ever been used on common criminals, on people with simple minds. They had never faced a scribe, much less one with a perfect memory and a mind now a living archive of the forgotten truth. A new sensation pulsed through the air, colder than the Grand Archive's humming energy. It was a sterile, clean feeling, a mental silence that sought to snuff out any chaos. It was the purifiers broadcasting their presence, searching for a flaw in the system, and Lyra was the biggest flaw of all. "Follow me," the keeper said, his voice a low growl. He pulled her deeper into the labyrinth of maintenance tunnels, his movements no longer frantic but precise. He knew these tunnels like the lines on his own hand. Lyra, with her expanded consciousness, could feel the walls around them, the cold metal and stone, and the faint, humming echo of a billion purchased memories from the Grand Archive above. She was not just running from them, she was fighting them, her mind broadcasting a low, constant frequency of defiance against their attempts to silence her. As they ran, the tunnels around them began to change. The clean, simple aesthetic of the purifier's broadcast began to override the space. The rust and grime on the walls began to fade, replaced by a smooth, polished sheen. The air, once filled with the scent of dust and damp metal, began to smell of antiseptic. The purifiers were not just coming for her. They were cleansing the world around them of any imperfection. Lyra looked at the keeper, his face etched with a grim determination. "They won't stop," he said, his voice filled with a terrible certainty. "They will hunt us to the end. The purifiers are more than men. They are an extension of the family's will, a final, absolute act of control." She felt a new sensation, a cold spike in her mind. It was a probe, a thin, crystalline tendril of a purifier's consciousness trying to breach her mental defenses. She had never felt anything like it. It was like a needle searching for a single, frayed thread to pull. She deflected it, her mind a fortress of 1,000 forgotten memories. The messy, chaotic truth of the forgotten past a wall it could not penetrate. But she knew it was only a matter of time. She couldn't fight them forever. They ran for what felt like hours, their frantic flight a desperate rhythm against the sterile, methodical advance of their pursuers. As they moved, Lyra saw glimpses of the chaos above. Through a narrow grate, she saw a market square, its normal hustle and bustle replaced by a terrified silence. A merchant, his memory jars now cold and lifeless, stood frozen, his face a mask of profound confusion. He was feeling a new sensation, a strange, terrifying feeling of emptiness, of having to choose for himself, to feel for himself. The raw, unadulterated sensation of free will was taking root, and it was a terrifying experience for a people who had never known it. They rounded a corner and came to a dead end. A massive steel door, a remnant of a forgotten section of the archive, was sealed shut. The keeper looked at it, his face a mask of despair. "It's a trap," he said, his voice a low whisper. "They herded us. They knew where we were going." A sudden wave of cold, crystalline energy washed over them. The purifiers were close. Lyra could feel their minds, a single, unified consciousness with a singular purpose, to purge her. She felt their mental probe, this time more powerful, more precise. It was searching for the exact moment she had connected with the pylons, the moment she had become an archivist of the forgotten. It was looking for the flaw. The keeper looked at her, his gaunt face filled with a rare, terrifying beauty. He had a choice to make, and he made it. He looked at a series of jars he had carried with him, the ones filled with the emotions too chaotic for the masses. He held out a single, glowing red jar, its contents a vibrant, pulsing rage. This is it, scribe, a memory they have not encountered in centuries, a memory of righteous fury. It will not hurt them. It will confuse them. It will buy you time, but it will not last. No, Lyra said, her voice filled with a frantic desperation. You can't. They will purge you. They have already taken everything from me, scribe, he said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. All that's left is this, and this is not for sale. He plunged his mind into the jar, and a wave of pure, unfiltered rage, a raw and unthinking fury, washed over the tunnels. The clean, antiseptic presence of the purifiers recoiled, their methodical advance momentarily broken. They were a system of order, and this was pure, unadulterated chaos. Go, scribe, the keeper screamed, his voice filled with the echoing, furious energy of the memory. Go, tell them all. The world is not a commodity. It is a choice. It is a choice. Lyra ran. The keeper sacrificed a burning core of new purpose in her soul. She ran with the grace of a gazelle and the purpose of a revolutionary. She found a small grate, a tiny flaw in the purifier's clean, polished world, and she scrambled through it, the sound of the keeper's screams of rage and defiance a fading echo behind her. She emerged into the city, into the chaotic, terrified, and beautiful world she had created. The people were still frozen, their hands hovering over the now silent memory jars, their faces a mix of fear and dawning comprehension. The family's power was gone, replaced by a seed of rebellion. The keeper had died to plant that seed. Now, Lyra had to make sure it grew. She was no longer just a scribe, or a scribe of the forgotten. She was the architect of a new world, and the families would not stop until they found her. Her war had just begun, but she was no longer alone. The city was with her. She just had to find a way to make them see it. The city was a tableau of chaos, a world of silent terror and dawning confusion. Lyra emerged from the grate into a street she had always known to be filled with the gentle hum of commerce, but was now a graveyard of still bodies. The people were not dead, but frozen, their hands hovering over memory jars that no longer pulsed with life. Their faces, once serene and empty, were now a landscape of profound, unsettling emotion. Some were wide-eyed with fear, others with a quiet, terrifying understanding. They were all experiencing the same thing, the raw, unfiltered feeling of free will. Lyra, with her mind now an archive of a million moments of choice, saw the terror in their eyes not as a flaw, but as a beginning. The keeper's sacrifice had bought her time, but it had also set the stage for the next, most dangerous part of her plan. She had to give them a voice. She had to make them understand. She couldn't broadcast to them anymore. She had to speak to them, one by one, face to face. She moved with a quiet, frantic urgency, a ghost in the midst of a waking world. She saw a merchant, his face a mask of profound confusion. He was a plump, jovial man who had always sold peaceful mornings and pleasant memories of childhood. Now, his jar was a dull, lifeless crystal, and his face was edged with a raw terror she had never seen. Lyra reached out, her hand hovering over his shoulder. "The jars are silent," she whispered, her voice filled with a desperate certainty. "They are not broken. You are not broken. You are free." The man looked at her, his eyes, once empty, now filled with a strange dawning light. "Free," he whispered, the word foreign on his lips. "What is free?" Lyra's mind, her living archive, provided the answer. She didn't show him a manufactured memory. She showed him the memory of a simple moment from the bedrock, the raw feeling of a person making a choice. She showed him a father making the choice to teach his child a skill, a person making the choice to help a neighbor, a life lived not for a purchased feeling, but for a deliberate act of will. The merchant's face contorted, a mix of pain and wonder. He recoiled, as if burned, but then he looked at his jar, its contents now worthless, and he looked at Lyra, her face a beacon of terrible truth. He saw it. He understood. His fear was replaced by a quiet, simmering anger, a raw, unadulterated fury that was all his own. He looked at her, his eyes now filled with a desperate conviction. "They lied," he said, his voice a low growl. "They stole our lives, and just like that, Lyra had an ally. He was not a scribe, not a keeper, but a simple merchant, a man whose life had just been returned to him." But their moment of understanding was short-lived. A new sound filled the air, not the sterile hum of the purifiers, but the heavy, deliberate thud of boots on cobblestone. The family's guards, the physical manifestation of their power. They were heavily armored, their faces hidden behind polished helms. Their hands were not empty. They held small, crystalline rods, a crude, physical version of the purifier's mental probe. They were not there to reason. They were there to re-establish control. They were a hammer looking for a nail. The guards began to move through the frozen populace, their movements methodical and unforgiving. They didn't see people. They saw flaws in the system that needed to be corrected. Lyra saw a young woman, her face filled with a terrifying mix of joy and terror, her hands clenched in a fist, a rare, unpurchased emotion. A guard raised his rod, its tip pulsing with a low white light. "Wait!" Lyra screamed, her voice cutting through the silence. "Don't touch her. She's a person, not a flaw." The guards turned, their helms perfectly aligned with her. They saw her, the scribe of the forgotten, the cause of all the chaos. One of them raised his rod, and Lyra knew this was it. The merchant, her new ally, grabbed a broken memory jar from his store, its shards glinting in the pale sun. He didn't have a plan. He had a choice. He threw the jar, a small, futile act of defiance against a massive system of control. The jar hit the guard's chest, shattering with a soft, hollow sound. It didn't hurt him. It was a meaningless act. But it was a choice. The guard hesitated, his movements a fraction of a second slower, his pristine armor now marred by the shards of a worthless memory jar. It was all Lyra needed. She reached out, her mind a perfect conduit, and she did something she had never done before. She didn't share a memory. She shared a sensation, the feeling of the keeper's sacrifice, the moment he had plunged his mind into a memory of rage. She pushed the feeling into the merchant's mind, into the minds of the people around her, into the minds of the terrified populace. It was not a message. It was a feeling of purpose, of defiance, of a life that was not for sale. The people, who had been frozen in fear, began to stir. The terror on their faces was replaced by a slow, dawning comprehension. The merchant, his hand bleeding from the shards of the memory jar, looked at Lyra, his eyes filled with a fiery, unyielding purpose. The world was no longer silent. The families had shattered their world with a lie, but now the people were going to rebuild it with the truth. Lyra had found her voice, but she was no longer alone. She was the first whisper of a revolution. The families had just learned that their power was not in their memories, but in the people who chose to keep them. The guard recoiled, the worthless shards of the memory jar scattered across his polished armor like a defiant constellation. The momentary hesitation was a chink in the armor of the family's control, and Lyra, seeing the opportunity, pushed her mind's full force into the crowd. She shared not just a memory, but a feeling, the raw, unfiltered fury of the keeper's sacrifice. It was an emotion that had no place in their ordered world, and it was a catalyst for chaos. The people, who had been frozen in terror, began to move. A collective murmur rose from the street, the sound of a million minds waking at once. It was not a roar of revolution yet, but a low, dangerous growl. The merchant, his hand bleeding, picked up a broken piece of his memory jar. The sharp edge a perfect, painful metaphor for the world he now saw. His eyes, once empty, were now alight with a purpose that was all his own. The guards, trained for compliance, not defiance, were caught off guard. They raised their crystalline rods, their tips pulsing with a low, white light designed to cleanse the minds of the populace. They were not expecting a fight. They were expecting a clean-up, but the people did not wait for them. The young woman whose hand had been clenched in a fist, her face now a canvas of unpurchased emotion, screamed, not in fear, but in pure, unadulterated rage. She threw herself at a guard, her hands a blur of motion. She didn't have a weapon, but she had a fury that was all her own. The guard, unprepared for such a chaotic, unpredictable attack, stumbled backward. The spell was broken. The city was no longer a silent graveyard. It was a battlefield. A man with a stack of old scrolls in his hands used them as a shield against a goddess rod. A woman, her face filled with a terrifying mix of grief and defiance, threw her memory jars at a guard, each one shattering with a soft, hollow sound, each a small, defiant protest. The guards, with their methodical training and their sterile weapons, were no match for the messy, brutal truth of human emotion. They were fighting a ghost, a virus of will that was spreading from one mind to the next. Lyra stood in the center of the chaos, her mind a perfect conduit for a million moments of choice. She was no longer just a scribe. She was a general. She saw the guards' every move, their thoughts a series of cold, mathematical commands. She saw the people's chaotic, uncoordinated movements, their emotions a beautiful, unpredictable storm. She didn't command them. She guided them. She used her perfect memory to find a weakness in the guards' formation, a single moment of vulnerability, and she pushed the idea to the people around her, not as a command, but as a thought, a shared instinct. The guards, with their unified, sterile minds, were a single target. The people, with their chaotic, individual truths, were a million. The chaos was winning. But as the battle raged, a new presence entered the square. It was not a physical person, but a mental one. A cold, surgical mind. An older, more refined version of the purifier's mental probe. It was a mind with a purpose not to cleanse, but to dismantle. It was not looking for flaws in the system. It was looking for the architect of the chaos. It was looking for Lyra. She felt it the moment it entered the square. It was a presence of absolute, total control. A mind that had spent centuries curating a history and would not see it undone. It was one of the families, a high-ranking Lumina, broadcasting directly into the square. Lyra had fought soldiers and assassins. Now, she was fighting a god. The Luminar's mental presence was not a flood of information, but a surgical, precise needle of control. It went straight for the people's minds, trying to find the seed of free will she had planted and rip it out by the root. The people, who had just begun to fight, felt a new wave of terror, a mental assault that was far more terrifying than a crystalline rod. The merchant, his defiance a burning flame, stumbled back, his eyes going blank, his will threatening to be snuffed out. Lyra, her mind a fortress, knew she couldn't deflect this. She had to fight. She looked at the Luminar's mental presence, and she saw not a person, but an archive. A perfect, curated history of a life of power and dominance. It was an unblemished lie. She reached into her own mind, into the bedrock of the world, into the chaotic, unorganized, and raw memories of the forgotten past. She didn't send a memory. She sent a feeling. The feeling of being small, of being powerless. The feeling of a million moments of suffering that the families had systematically erased from their history. It was a feeling that Lumina had never experienced. The Luminar's mental presence wavered, a perfect, unblemished lie now marred by a single, terrifying truth. It recoiled, not in pain, but in sheer, agonizing confusion. It was a moment of weakness, a single glorious flaw in an unblemished mind. Lyra pushed her advantage. She had found a weakness in the family's armor. She began to broadcast, not to the people, but to the Lumina. She showed him the quiet, simple moments of the forgotten past, the life he had purged, the world he had destroyed. She showed him the memory of a simple song, of a person helping a neighbor, of a life lived for something other than a purchased feeling. She showed him a world where he had no power. The Luminar's mental presence shrieked, a soundless scream of a perfect system breaking down. The man, a powerful figurehead of one of the most powerful families, fell to his knees, his hands clutching his head, his mind a battlefield of truths he was not meant to know. Lyra had won the first battle against the true enemy, but the victory was only a moment. She looked at the crowd, at the merchant, at the people who had just found their will. The families had just learned that their power was not in their memories, but in the people who chose to keep them. Lyra had found her voice, but she was no longer alone. She was the first whisper of a revolution, and the families now knew they had a war on their hands. Lyra and her allies had to find a way to escape and build a revolution. The Grand Archive was no longer a city of memories, it was a city of choices. The Lumina was a shattered monument to his own hubris, his mind a battlefield of truths he could not comprehend. His guards, without the telepathic command of their master, stood confused and directionless, their crystalline rods now useless ornaments. The people, filled with a raw fury and a dawning sense of purpose, did not need a general. They needed an escape. The battle was won, but the war was still at its earliest, most dangerous stage. Lyra, her mind buzzing with the echoes of a million truths, grabbed the merchant's arm, her voice low and urgent. "We have to go. More will come. They will not send soldiers next time. They will send purifiers." The merchant, his defiance a burning flame in his eyes, didn't hesitate. He looked at the young woman who had thrown herself at the guard, and at the man with the scrolls, his hands now empty of everything but a raw courage. "We must go. The scribe speaks the truth." The people, no longer frozen, began to stir, a low, dangerous murmur passing through the crowd. They looked at Lyra, not with fear or confusion, but with a silent, profound question in their eyes. What now? Lyra didn't answer them with words. She answered them with a feeling of movement, of unity, of a group of people with a shared purpose, heading towards a single, unseen destination. She broadcast the idea of the Undercity, of a place of safety, of a world that existed below the family's perfect fard. The people began to move, a flowing river of newfound purpose, not following her as a leader, but joining her as a companion. They moved with the desperate grace of a hunted animal, a silent, flowing wave of defiance. The merchant, now a quiet leader, went with them, his eyes, once empty, now filled with a ferocious, protective gaze. He saw the world not as a place to buy a life, but as a place to fight for one. The young woman, her rage now a cold, steel-like resolve, moved with them as well, a silent sentinel for the scribe who had given her a voice. They descended into the Undercity, into the labyrinthine tunnels below the city. It was a world of dust and rust, of forgotten dreams and buried truths. The air, once filled with the constant, humming drone of the Grand Archive, was now filled with a new sound. The sound of 1,000 people, their movements a quiet, unified symphony of escape. Lyra, with her perfect memory, found her way back to the keeper's hovel, its small, unassuming presence a beacon in the darkness. Inside, the hovel was just as she had left it, the jars of chaotic emotions glowing with a quiet, menacing light. The keeper's sacrifice was a silent monument to a truth he had died to reveal. Lyra looked at her new allies, at the faces of a merchant, a woman, a man with scrolls, and a dozen others who had followed her. They were not scribes, not keepers. They were just people, and they were her army. The families will come, Lyra said, her voice a low, steady command. They will not stop. They will not rest. They will not tolerate a world where people are in charge of their own lives. The merchant looked at her, his hands still bleeding from the shards of the memory jar. What do? We are a handful of people against a kingdom of lies. We are more than a handful, Lyra said, her voice filled with a desperate certainty. We are a network of 1,000,000 truths. We just have to make them see it. She then began to teach them. She did not teach them how to fight or how to use a weapon. She taught them how to share. She taught them to reach into their own minds, into the tiny, raw, unpolished moments of their own lives that they had always overlooked. The moment a child laughed, the feeling of a hand holding theirs, the taste of a hot meal on a cold day. These were not memories to be sold. They were truths to be shared. She taught them how to send these feelings to one another, not with a broadcast, but with a simple, quiet thought. The merchant, with his merchant's mind, understood the concept immediately. It was a form of currency, a new kind of economy. But this time, the currency was not for sale. It was for sharing. He looked at the others, at the young woman with her fiery eyes, and he smiled. It was a new kind of smile, filled with a quiet, dangerous joy. The keeper had died for the rage. Now, they would live for the truth. As the sun rose over the city, a new, silent network began to form in the shadows of the Undercity. A single whisper, a single thought, a single shared truth passed from one mind to the next. The families were still on top, but their world was no longer a gilded cage of purchased memories. It was a battlefield, a city of choices, and a handful of rebels in the darkness of the Undercity were building a revolution. The Undercity, once a graveyard of dust and forgotten metal, was now a garden of truths. 1,000 people, once silent and empty, now moved with a new, quiet purpose. They were not an army, but a network, a silent, flowing web of shared truths, each mind a node, each shared memory a connection. The merchant, his hand now scarred but his eyes unclouded, became the Undercity's first cartographer, mapping the pathways not with lines and grids, but with the flow of emotion. He was a man who had sold memories of comfort. Now he was a man who shared the truth of resilience. The young woman, her rage now a fierce, protective fire, became their sentinel, her senses attuned not to physical danger but to the cold, sterile presence of the purifiers. Lyra stood at the center of this burgeoning revolution, her mind perfect, humming nexus of 1,000,000 truths. She was no longer just a scribe. She was a conduit, a bridge between a forgotten past and a future that was not yet written. The people were her army, and their weapon was not a crystalline rod, but a shared truth. The families, from their polished, perfect hours above, watched the chaos with a cold, surgical precision. The city was a virus, and they were the cure. They did not send soldiers. They sent their best. They sent the luminous themselves. The first sign of the final assault was not a sound, but a silence. The low, chaotic murmur of the Undercity, the shared truths flowing from one mind to the next, was suddenly snuffed out. It was a vacuum, an emptiness that spoke of a power so immense it could erase an entire thought. Lyra felt it immediately. It was a new presence, a single, unified consciousness that was not just looking to purge, but to dismantle, to erase not just the memories, but the very act of sharing them. This was not a Lumina. This was the collective consciousness of the families themselves, broadcasting from the highest tower of the Grand Archive. It was a single, flawless, terrifying mind, a god of a perfect, unblemished lie. The people, their newfound purpose suddenly gone, froze. The merchant, his eyes filled with a dawning terror, looked at Lyra. They are everywhere, he whispered, his voice trembling. They are in my head. They are in all our heads. Lyra, her mind a fortress of chaos, felt the probe. It was not a needle this time, but a cold, surgical hand reaching into her mind. not to find a flaw, but to find the very core of her being. It was looking for the free will, the raw, unpolished truth she had taken from the bedrock. It was looking for the heart of the revolution. She knew she couldn't win this alone. She was a single mind, no matter how perfect. The families were a collective, 1,000 minds bound by a single, terrifying purpose. She had to fight them with their own logic. She had to fight them not as a person, but as a network. Lyra reached out with her mind, connecting to the merchant, to the young woman, to every single person in the Undercity who had chosen to follow her. She did not send a command, she sent an idea, the idea of unity. She showed them how to combine their thoughts, their feelings, their chaotic, beautiful truths into a single, unified signal. She showed them how to become a single, collective consciousness, a mirror image of the families, but one forged not of lies, but of truths. The people, with their shared memories of joy, of grief, of anger, of love, began to hum. It was a low, resonant sound that was not in the air, but in the mind. 1,000 individual truths, 1,000 individual wills, began to merge into a single, unified consciousness. A mind so beautiful and so powerful. It was terrifying. It was a force of nature. It was the collective memory of a people who had just chosen to be free. The family's mental presence wavered, their surgical precision now faced with a chaotic, beautiful truth. Their single, polished consciousness was a fragile glass against a tidal wave of 1,000 individual truths. Lyra, the conductor of this symphony of souls, did not command. She guided. She took the Luminar's sterile, curated lie, a history of flawless perfection, and she held it up to the light of the shared truths. She showed the Lumina the simple, unpolished truth of a child's love, the love of a parent, the resilience of a people who had nothing but their will. The Luminar's mental presence shrieked, a soundless scream of a perfect system breaking down. The man, a powerful figurehead of one of the most powerful families, fell to his knees, his hands clutching his head, his mind a battlefield of truths he was not meant to know. One by one, the family's mental presence is shattered, their flawless lies unable to withstand the raw, unpolished, and utterly real truth of the people's collective consciousness. The Grand Archive, the towering monument to their lie, began to hum with a new sound, not the constant drone of a million purchased memories, but the low, chaotic buzz of a million raw, individual truths. The jars of emotion, the ones the keeper had sold and the ones the families had hoarded, all began to pulse with a new, vibrant, and uncontrolled light. The city was free. Lyra stood in the center of the Undercity, her mind no longer a vessel for others' memories, but a living, breathing archive of a million shared truths. The people were no longer a network. They were a community. They had not been saved. They had saved themselves. As the sun rose over the city, the Grand Archive, once a symbol of their oppression, was now a monument to their liberation. The families had not just lost their power, they had lost their lie. Lyra looked at the merchant, at the young woman, at the people who had followed her. She was no longer their general. She was their scribe, a scribe not of the forgotten, but of the remembered. She would not document their history for a prize. She would help them write it, one shared truth at a time. The war was over. The work had just begun. The city was a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with the messy, beautiful, and utterly real truth of a people who had just chosen to be free.